The Vampire King had tested generals, billionaires, senators, and nobles for more than 600 years, but the one person who was about to surprise him was a shy waitress earning $12 an hour on the night shift. The neon sign outside Dawson's diner buzzed softly against the darkness, painting the empty parking lot in shades of blue and pink. Inside, Claire Dawson wiped down the last table of the night while an old country song drifted from a radio near the kitchen. The dinner rush had ended hours ago. The coffee pots were nearly empty. The stack of clean plates behind the counter gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. It was almost midnight, and the diner felt like a lonely island floating in a sea of darkness. Claire moved quietly through the room. She always did. Most customers barely remembered her face after leaving. She wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention. She was the kind who remembered extra napkins, refilled coffee before someone asked, and slipped free pie to exhausted truck drivers when nobody was looking. Tonight had been especially slow. A thunderstorm had rolled across the city earlier, keeping people home. Only a handful of customers had come through the doors. One of them stood out in her memory. A tall man dressed in a charcoal coat had taken a booth near the window 3 hours earlier. He had ordered black coffee and spent most of the evening staring at the rain. He hadn't looked at his phone once. He hadn't spoken to anyone except Claire. Even then, he had only said 3 words. "More coffee, please." There had been something unusual about him. Not frightening, not threatening, just different. His eyes seemed older than the rest of him. When Claire brought his check, he paid in cash, left a generous tip, and walked out into the storm without touching the umbrella resting beside him. She remembered watching him disappear into the rain. Now the booth sat empty. Claire picked up a spray bottle and moved toward it. The scent of lemon cleaner filled the air as she reached across the table. Her rag brushed against something solid beneath the bench seat. She paused. Frowning slightly, she crouched down and reached underneath. Her fingers closed around a small object. It was a wooden box. Claire pulled it into the light. The box was beautiful, dark polished wood, silver corners, strange carvings running along every edge. It looked expensive, far too expensive for a diner booth. She glanced toward the front door. Empty. The parking lot beyond the glass was deserted. Maybe one of the customers had forgotten it. That happened sometimes. Phones, wallets, keys, but never something like this. Claire set the box on the table. For several seconds, she simply stared at it. Then she looked around the diner again. Nobody. The clock above the kitchen clicked to 11:58 p.m. She should have put the box in Lost and Found and gone home. Instead, curiosity pulled at her. Just a little. Her fingers brushed across the silver latch. The metal felt strangely cold. She hesitated. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city. Claire slowly lifted the box. It felt heavier than it should have. Much heavier. As if something valuable rested inside. Unfortunately for her, less than a mile away, a man standing on the rooftop of a 40-story building was watching the diner through a pair of ancient eyes, and at that exact moment, he was waiting to see what choice she would make next. Claire swallowed hard and looked back at the mysterious box, resting beneath the fluorescent lights. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A faint silver glow was leaking through the edges of the lid. Claire stared at the faint silver glow leaking through the edges of the wooden box. For a moment she wondered if exhaustion was playing tricks on her eyes. She blinked twice. The glow remained, soft, steady, almost like moonlight trapped inside polished wood. The diner suddenly felt quieter than before. The refrigerator hummed behind the counter. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Somewhere beyond the highway, a freight train sounded its horn. Claire slowly lowered herself into the booth. The box rested in front of her. Her fingers hovered over the latch again. Curiosity pulled one way. Common sense pulled the other. Finally, she exhaled and carefully lifted the lid. The silver glow disappeared instantly. Inside sat a single object wrapped in dark velvet. Nothing moved. Nothing magical happened. No hidden mechanism. No strange sound. Just a package resting in the center of the box. Claire felt slightly foolish. She glanced around the empty diner and gave a nervous laugh. Maybe she really was overtired. She gently unfolded the velvet cloth. The object beneath caught the light immediately. It was a medallion unlike anything she had ever seen. The metal looked like silver, but brighter. Cleaner, almost untouched by time. Delicate patterns spiraled around the edges. Tiny symbols were engraved across the surface. At the center rested a dark stone that reflected the fluorescent lights like black glass. Claire lifted it carefully. The medallion felt unexpectedly warm, not hot, just warm enough to feel strange. She turned it over, more symbols, more intricate carvings. Whoever owned it had probably spent a fortune. She quickly wrapped it again and closed the box. The decision seemed obvious. Lost and found. Tomorrow morning she would call local antique dealers, maybe even the police department if nobody claimed it. Problem solved. Yet as she stood from the booth, something caught her attention. A folded piece of paper rested beneath the box. Claire frowned. She was certain it had not been there before. She picked it up and unfolded it. There were only 6 words written in neat black ink. Keep it safe for one night. No name, no explanation, nothing else. Claire stared at the message. Her pulse quickened slightly. The handwriting looked recent, deliberate, as though whoever wrote it expected her to find it. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the diner windows before disappearing down the road. Claire folded the note and slipped it into her apron pocket. 20 minutes later, she locked the front doors and stepped into the cool night air. The storm had weakened. Water still dripped from the roof gutters. Puddles reflected the neon sign overhead. She carried the wooden box beneath one arm as she crossed the parking lot toward her aging sedan. Halfway there, she stopped. A man stood near the edge of the lot beneath a street lamp, the same man from earlier. The customer who had spent hours drinking coffee by the window. Claire recognized the charcoal coat immediately. Rainwater glistened on the pavement around him. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then the stranger stepped forward. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable. "You found it," he said. His voice was smooth and quiet. "I was actually hoping to return it." The stranger looked at the box, then back at her. "Not tonight." Claire frowned. "Is it yours?" A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "That depends on how you define ownership." The answer only confused her more. "There is something valuable inside," she said carefully. "You should probably take it before someone else finds it." The man glanced toward the highway where distant traffic rolled beneath the night sky. "No," he said. "I would rather you keep it." Claire stared at him. Why? For the first time, his eyes settled fully on hers. There was something unusual about them. Not their color, their stillness. The kind of stillness she usually saw in people much older than they looked. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "the person who finds something tells you more than the person who lost it." Before Claire could respond, a black sedan turned into the parking lot. Its headlights briefly illuminated the stranger's face. Claire instinctively looked toward the vehicle. The distraction lasted less than a second. When she looked back, the man was gone, completely gone. Only the rain-slick pavement remained beneath the street lamp. Claire stood frozen beside her car, clutching the mysterious box tighter than before. What she did not know was that less than a mile away, inside a glass tower overlooking the city, someone was already watching security footage from the diner, and the first phase of a carefully planned test had officially begun. Claire drove home with both hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The wooden box rested on the passenger seat beside her, secured by the seatbelt as though another passenger. Streetlights flashed across its polished surface as she moved through the sleeping city. Every few minutes she glanced toward it. Nothing happened, no silver glow, no strange sounds, just a box. And yet she could not stop thinking about the man in the parking lot. His words replayed in her mind. Sometimes the person who finds something tells you more than the person who lost it. By the time she reached her apartment building, the rain had faded into a light mist. Claire climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, carrying the box carefully against her chest. The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and laundry detergent. Inside apartment 2B, a lamp glowed in the corner of the living room. Her grandmother had fallen asleep in a recliner, with a blanket across her lap and a crossword puzzle resting on her chest. Claire smiled softly. She covered her grandmother with an extra blanket before quietly slipping into her bedroom. The room was small but comfortable. A bookshelf stood beside the window. Family photos lined the dresser. A framed picture showed Claire and her grandmother smiling at a county fair years earlier. She placed the wooden box on her desk and stared at it for several seconds. Then she pulled out her phone. No missed calls, no reports about a missing antique, no messages from the diner owner, nothing. The entire situation felt increasingly strange. Eventually, curiosity won again. Claire sat down and carefully opened the box for a second time. The velvet wrapping remained exactly where she had left it. The medallion rested inside, silent and beautiful beneath the lamplight. This time she studied it more closely. Tiny symbols circled the edge in repeating patterns. Some resembled letters, others looked completely unfamiliar. She turned the medallion over. There, hidden near the bottom, she noticed something new. A crown above a circle of stars. The design looked ancient, formal, almost royal. Claire reached for her laptop and began searching online. Antique silver medallions, historical crests. Hours passed. Search results filled the screen. Most led nowhere. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, she finally found something similar. Not identical, similar. A photograph from a museum archive showed an old document bearing a nearly matching symbol. The accompanying article described it as a rare emblem associated with an elite vampire family that had disappeared from public records more than a century ago. Claire leaned back in her chair. Vampires. Most Americans knew they existed. They owned corporations, controlled private estates, appeared occasionally in financial magazines and society pages. But the highest-ranking vampire families rarely interacted with ordinary people. Their world existed parallel to everyone else's, separate, distant, untouchable. She looked back at the crest on the medallion. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Her pulse quickened. Suddenly the object felt even less like lost property and more like something important. Something that should not have been forgotten inside a roadside diner. She was not the only person researching the medallion that night. Several miles away, inside a glass-walled office overlooking Manhattan, Sebastian Romano stood before a wall of monitors. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond him. On one screen appeared security footage from Dawson's diner, on another an image from Claire's apartment building entrance. A silver-haired advisor stood nearby. Most people would have sold it already, the advisor said quietly. Sebastian remained silent. His eyes never left the screen, showing Claire seated at her desk. She searched for the owner, the advisor continued. Interesting, but hardly extraordinary. Sebastian watched as Claire carefully returned the medallion to its velvet wrapping. Then she locked the box inside the bottom drawer of her desk. Not because she wanted to keep it, because she wanted to protect it until she found its rightful owner. For the first time that evening, a faint expression crossed Sebastian's face. Not satisfaction, not victory, something closer to curiosity. Meanwhile, back in apartment 2B, Claire switched off her desk lamp and prepared for bed. She had no idea that her decision had already been noticed, and she certainly did not know that by sunrise, someone would offer her enough money to change her entire life forever. Claire barely slept. By morning, sunlight filtered through thin apartment curtains, painting pale rectangles across her bedroom floor. The wooden box remained locked inside her desk drawer exactly where she had left it. For several seconds she stood staring at the drawer while brushing her hair. Part of her wanted to forget the entire situation. Another part knew she could not. The medallion was simply too valuable, too unusual, and too connected to questions she could not answer. After checking on her grandmother and finishing a quick breakfast, Claire carried the box to her car before heading across town. Her destination was a small antique district tucked between older brick buildings near the riverfront. The neighborhood had survived decades of change. Narrow storefronts displayed everything from vintage watches to rare books and historical artifacts. If anyone could identify the medallion properly, it would be someone there. The morning air felt cool as she stepped onto the sidewalk. A bell chimed softly when she entered a shop called Harrington Antiques. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight. Glass cases lined the walls. Hundreds of objects sat quietly behind them, each carrying pieces of someone else's story. An elderly man looked up from behind a counter. Round glasses rested on the end of his nose. "Can I help you?" he asked. Claire hesitated before placing the wooden box on the counter. "I found something," she said carefully. "I am trying to identify it and return it to its owner." The man's expression brightened with professional curiosity. Minutes later, he sat beneath a reading lamp, examining the medallion through a magnifying lens. At first he appeared calm, then his eyebrows rose, then they rose higher. Finally, he removed the glasses entirely and stared at the object in silence. Claire felt her stomach tighten. "Is something wrong?" she asked. The man looked at her. "Young lady, where exactly did you get this?" "It was left behind." He glanced back at the medallion. "This piece is extraordinary." Claire remained quiet. The antique dealer carefully rotated the medallion beneath the light. Handcrafted silver alloy, historical insignia, rare stonework. If authentic, he stopped speaking for several seconds. If authentic, this could be worth several $1,000,000. Claire nearly laughed. Sounded impossible. Several $1,000,000 belonged in movies and financial news reports, not inside a wooden box discovered beneath a diner booth. "You are serious?" she asked. "Completely." The dealer lowered his voice. "In fact, I strongly recommend not discussing this item publicly. Collectors would pay fortunes for it. Claire looked down at the medallion. Her thoughts immediately drifted toward unpaid bills, medical expenses, apartment repairs, and every financial struggle she and her grandmother had faced over the years. Several $1,000,000 could solve all of it. Every problem, every worry. Yet the feeling lasted only a moment. The medallion still belonged to someone else. That fact refused to change. The dealer carefully returned it. If you ever decide to sell, call me first. Claire thanked him and placed the medallion back inside its velvet wrapping. As she stepped outside, she noticed a black luxury vehicle parked across the street. Its windows were heavily tinted. Cities were full of expensive cars, but when she walked 2 blocks toward her sedan, the vehicle rolled forward as well. Slow, deliberate. Claire frowned. Maybe coincidence. She turned another corner. The vehicle appeared again. Her pace slowed. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Not fear, awareness, as though invisible eyes had suddenly focused on her. Less than 15 feet away, a sharply dressed man exited a nearby building and approached with a polite smile. "Miss Dawson?" Claire stopped. "Yes." The stranger handed her a business card. No company name, no logo, only a phone number embossed in silver lettering. "Someone would like to make an offer regarding the item in your possession," he said. Claire looked down at the card, then back up. "What item?" The man smiled slightly. "The one worth more money than most people see in a lifetime." Before she could ask another question, he stepped back toward the waiting vehicle. Moments later, both disappeared into traffic. Claire remained frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the card in her hand, because for the first time since finding the box, she realized something important. She was no longer the only person looking for its owner. Someone else had started looking for her. Claire spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on ordinary things. She stopped for groceries. She picked up a prescription refill for her grandmother. She even returned 2 missed calls from co-workers at the diner. None of it helped. The silver-lettered business card remained tucked inside her purse, like a weight she could not ignore. By the time her evening shift began, the city had settled beneath a blanket of low grey clouds. The familiar scent of coffee and grilled sandwiches filled the diner. Plates clattered, customers came and went. Everything appeared normal. Yet Claire found herself glancing toward the front door every few minutes. She did not know what she was expecting. Maybe another stranger, maybe another offer, maybe an explanation. Unfortunately, explanations seemed in short supply lately. Around 8 o'clock, the dinner rush slowed. Claire carried a fresh pot of coffee toward a booth near the window. Halfway there, her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. She ignored it at first, then it vibrated again and again. During a brief break, she stepped behind the counter and checked the screen. The number was unknown. After a moment of hesitation, she answered. "Hello?" A calm male voice responded immediately. "Miss Dawson, thank you for taking the call." Claire recognized neither the voice nor the number. "Who is this?" "Someone interested in helping you." Claire nearly ended the call. "I am not interested. You have not heard the offer." She remained silent. The voice continued. "The item currently in your possession has attracted significant attention. Some people would pay extraordinary amounts for it." Claire looked across the diner. Customers laughed quietly over meals. A family shared dessert near the jukebox. The normal scene made the conversation feel even stranger. "It is not mine to sell," she said. The man paused. "Perhaps, but if ownership cannot be proven, that becomes a different discussion." Claire felt her patience thinning. "I am trying to find the owner." "And if the owner never appears?" Claire did not answer. $10 million, the man said. For a second she thought she had misheard him. "Excuse me, $10 million, wire transfer, immediate payment, no publicity, no complications." Claire stared at the floor. $10 million. The number barely felt real. Her grandmother would never worry about medical bills again. The apartment could be replaced, every debt erased, every problem solved. The offer was so large it almost felt absurd. Yet what unsettled her most was how casually the man said it, as though $10 million were nothing more than spare change. "No," Claire said quietly. Silence followed. Then the voice returned. "You are refusing without negotiation?" "Yes." "You have not even seen a contract." The line remained silent for several seconds. Finally, the man spoke again. "You are making an unusual decision, Miss Dawson. Maybe. Most people would not." Claire glanced through the diner window. Rain had started paths down the glass. "Most people are not me." The call ended shortly afterward. No threats, no arguments, just silence. Yet the conversation stayed with her long after she slipped the phone back into her pocket. Later that night, as Claire cleaned tables near closing time, she noticed a familiar figure seated alone in the farthest booth. Her breath caught slightly. The charcoal coat, the calm posture, the same man from the parking lot. He sat exactly where he had before, a cup of untouched coffee resting in front of him. Claire had not seen him enter. Somehow he was simply there, watching the rain beyond the window, waiting. And for the first time since finding the mysterious box, Claire realized she was no longer curious about the medallion alone. She wanted answers about the man who seemed to appear whenever the story moved forward. Slowly, she picked up a coffee pot and began walking toward his table. Claire stopped beside the booth and poured fresh coffee into the man's cup. Steam curled upward between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain tapped softly against the window behind him, and the neon sign outside painted shifting colors across the glass. The stranger thanked her with a small nod. Up close, he looked exactly as she remembered. Calm, polished, impossible to read. "I think we need to talk," she said. The man's eyes lifted toward hers. "About the box." Claire folded her arms. "About everything." The faintest trace of amusement appeared in his expression. "That is a very large subject. Then let us start small." She slid into the seat across from him before she could lose her nerve. "Who are you?" The stranger glanced toward the window. "A customer, that is not an answer. It is technically an answer." Claire sighed. The response irritated her more than she expected. "People are calling me, following me, offering money for something I found under a diner booth. Somehow I do not think that is normal." The stranger remained silent for several seconds. Then he looked back at her. "No, it is not normal." The honesty caught her off guard. "Do you know who owns it?" she asked. Perhaps. You ask direct questions, because nobody else gives direct answers." Outside, a car passed through the rain. Its headlights flashed briefly across the booth. For the first time, the stranger seemed to study her carefully. Not the box, not the medallion, her. "You could have accepted the money," he said. Claire shrugged. "That does not make it mine. $10 million is a difficult thing to ignore. I noticed." A quiet smile touched his face. "And yet you ignored it." Claire looked down at the table. The scratched surface had been polished by thousands of customers over the years. "My grandmother used to tell me that keeping something that belongs to someone else changes you. Maybe slowly, maybe all at once. Either way, it changes you." The stranger listened without interruption. "And you believe that?" he asked. "I do." The answer came easily, because it was true. For a moment, neither spoke. The diner seemed unusually quiet despite the soft sounds around them. Claire had the strange feeling that every word mattered more than it should. Finally, she reached into her apron pocket and removed the business card. She placed it on the table between them. "Do you know who sent this?" she asked. The stranger glanced at the silver lettering. His expression did not change, but something sharpened in his eyes. "Yes." Claire leaned forward. "Then tell me." Instead of answering, he picked up the card and turned it over once before setting it down again. "The people behind that number collect rare things. Collectors? Something like that. Can they prove ownership?" "No." The certainty in his voice surprised her. "Then why are they offering so much money?" The stranger looked toward the rain beyond the glass. "Because some objects cannot be replaced." Claire followed his gaze. "Then I need to find the real owner before someone else does." This time the stranger nodded. Not politely, seriously, as though she had finally reached the same conclusion he hoped she would reach. "I barely know where to start." The man reached into his coat pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. Claire opened it carefully. Written across the page was the name of a historical archive located downtown. Beneath it sat a single name. Claire frowned. The name meant nothing to her. "Who is Sebastian Romano?" she asked. The stranger stood from the booth. "Someone connected to the answers you are looking for." Claire immediately rose as well. "Wait." But the man was already moving toward the door. "Are you going there?" she called. He paused only long enough to glance back. "No," he said quietly. "You are." Seconds later, the bell above the entrance chimed. The door closed behind him. And as Claire looked down at the paper in her hands, she realized she had just been given her first real lead. What she did not know was that the name written on that page belonged to one of the most powerful men in the vampire world, and by this time tomorrow, she would be standing much closer to the truth than she ever imagined possible. The next morning arrived grey and cool. Clouds drifted above the city like slow-moving shadows, while Claire drove downtown with the wooden box secured beside her. The name Sebastian Romano remained on the folded paper resting in her cup holder. She had searched it online before leaving home. What she found made almost no sense. News articles, business charity foundations, real estate acquisitions, international investments. The same name appeared everywhere. Sebastian Romano was described as one of the wealthiest and most influential vampire figures in North America. Yet every photograph seemed strangely different. Some were decades old, some looked recent, none appeared to age. Claire told herself there had to be an explanation. By late morning she arrived at the historical archive mentioned on the paper. The building stood between two marble government structures, its tall columns weathered by time. Inside, the air smelled of old books and polished wood. Sunlight filtered through enormous windows, illuminating rows of records that stretched across multiple floors. Claire approached the information desk and showed the attendant the crest she had photographed from the medallion. Within minutes, she was directed toward a restricted historical collection. An elderly archivist greeted her there. After examining the image, he became unusually serious. "Where did you find this?" he asked. Claire recognized the question immediately. Everyone seemed to ask the same thing. "I am trying to locate the owner," she replied. The archivist studied her for several seconds before retrieving a large leather-bound volume from a locked cabinet. He opened it carefully. Dust drifted through the air. The pages contained photographs, family records, and historical notes dating back more than a century. Then Claire saw it. The crest, the exact same crest engraved on the medallion. Her pulse quickened. Beneath it appeared a name, Sebastian Romano. The archivist lowered his voice. "This symbol belongs to House Romano." Claire looked up. House Romano, one of the oldest vampire houses still in existence. He turned several pages. Portraits appeared, formal gatherings, historical ceremonies, corporate acquisitions, political events. And in photograph after photograph, one face remained unchanged. Sebastian Romano, the same dark hair, the same calm expression, the same eyes, decade after decade, century after century. Claire stared at the pages in disbelief. "That is impossible." The archivist offered no argument. He simply turned another page. The date printed beneath the photograph read 1928. The man looked exactly the same. Claire suddenly remembered the customer in the diner, the stranger in the parking lot, the man who always seemed to appear when she needed another tightened. At that exact moment, less than 2 miles away, a black vehicle waited outside the archive. Inside sat the very man she had been thinking about. Sebastian Romano watched the building through tinted glass. Beside him, a silver-haired advisor remained silent. "She knows now," the advisor finally said. Sebastian's gaze never moved from the entrance. "Yes, the test has gone further than any before it." Sebastian sighed the archive. Claire closed the book slowly. Suddenly, dozens of strange details clicked into place. The medallion, the mysterious note, the impossible offers, the man who appeared and disappeared without explanation. She reached into her bag and pulled out the folded paper once more. Sebastian Romano. The name no longer felt distant. It felt personal, real. The archivist hesitated before speaking again. "If you truly possess something connected to House Romano, there is one thing you should understand." Claire looked up. "What?" The old man closed the book. "Objects carrying that crest do not get lost by accident." A chill moved through her. Minutes later, she stepped back onto the city sidewalk carrying the box. Traffic flowed past. Horns echoed between buildings. Ordinary life continued around her. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore, because parked across the street, waiting beside the curb, stood the same black vehicle. And this time, when the rear door opened, Claire finally saw the stranger sitting inside. He looked directly at her and said 5 words that changed everything. "Miss Dawson, please join me." Claire stood motionless on the sidewalk while city traffic moved around her. The open car door waited across the street. Inside sat the man who had appeared and disappeared throughout the past several days. The man whose name now carried the weight of history books, corporate empires, and centuries of whispered rumors. Sebastian Romano watched her calmly, not impatient, not demanding, simply waiting. After a long moment, Claire crossed the street. The city noise faded as she stepped into the vehicle. The door closed softly behind her. The interior smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Sebastian sat opposite her, dressed in a dark suit that somehow made the entire vehicle feel smaller. For several seconds neither spoke. Claire finally broke the silence. "You knew the whole time." Sebastian met her gaze. The answer landed harder than she expected. Every strange encounter, every clue, every conversation, he had known exactly who she was while she remained completely in the dark. "The diner," she said quietly. "The parking lot, the notes, all of it." "Yes." Claire looked away toward the passing skyline outside the tinted windows. A feeling she could not quite name settled inside her chest. Disappointment, frustration, maybe both. "Why?" she asked. Sebastian remained silent for a moment before answering. Because I wanted to see what you would do. Claire turned back sharply. With the medallion? With the opportunity. The vehicle glided through downtown streets. Sunlight reflected from glass towers overhead. Sebastian folded his hands. His expression remained composed, but there was something unusually careful in his voice now. For 600 years I have watched people make choices when they believed nobody was watching. Claire frowned. What does that have to do with me? Everything. The answer came immediately. The medallion was never truly lost. Claire stared at him. The words seemed to slow the world around her. What? It was placed where you would find it. The city disappeared behind the window as the vehicle entered a private underground roadway. Claire barely noticed. Her attention remained fixed on Sebastian. You left it there? Yes. On purpose? Yes. She laughed once, though there was no humor in it. Sebastian did not deny it. The silence itself became confirmation. Claire leaned back into her seat. Suddenly every moment looked different. The mysterious box, the offers, the strange coincidences, the feeling of being observed. None of it had happened by chance. People offered me $10 million. I know, and you just watched. For the first time, Sebastian's expression shifted. Not much, just enough to reveal something beneath the calm surface. I watched because the answer mattered. Claire shook her head. The words hung between them. Neither spoke for several seconds. The vehicle finally slowed before a set of enormous black gates. Beyond them rose a building unlike anything Claire had ever seen. Glass and stone stretched into the sky, elegant, ancient, modern, all at once. As the gates opened, dozens of figures became visible inside the courtyard. Men and women dressed in dark formal clothing. Some turned toward the arriving vehicle immediately. Others were already watching. Waiting, Claire felt a chill run through her. What is this place? She asked. Sebastian looked through the window. My court. The answer barely registered before the vehicle rolled to a stop. Staff members approached. Massive doors opened ahead. Claire suddenly realized something else. None of the people outside looked surprised to see Sebastian. They looked respectful, careful, almost reverent, as though they were standing in the presence of someone far more important than a wealthy businessman. Sebastian stepped out first, then he offered his hand toward Claire. She hesitated before accepting it. The moment her feet touched the stone courtyard, dozens of eyes turned toward her, and from the expressions she saw, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever game Sebastian had been playing was over, because everyone here already knew exactly who she was. Claire followed Sebastian through the towering entrance, while dozens of silent eyes tracked her every step. The interior of the court was unlike anything she had imagined. Marble floors reflected the light of crystal chandeliers suspended 3 stories overhead. Dark wood panels lined the walls. Massive windows overlooked the city skyline beyond. Everything felt expensive, ancient, powerful, yet none of it held her attention for long. The people did. Men and women stood in small groups throughout the hall, their conversations fading as she passed. Some appeared curious, others looked openly skeptical. A few seemed disappointed before she had even spoken a word. Claire suddenly became very aware of her diner uniform beneath the borrowed coat she wore. She looked completely out of place. Sebastian seemed unaffected by the attention. He moved through the hall with quiet confidence. Nobody questioned him. Nobody blocked his path. People simply stepped aside. Eventually, they entered a circular chamber at the center of the building. Rows of elevated seats surrounded a polished black table. Several distinguished figures were already waiting. Their expressions grew noticeably colder when they saw Claire. An older woman with silver hair folded her hands together. So this is the human. Her voice echoed slightly across the room. Claire stopped walking. Sebastian remained beside her. This is Claire Dawson, he said. The woman barely acknowledged the introduction. The waitress. Another man seated nearby adjusted his glasses. The one who found the medallion. The one who refused $10 million. Someone else added. Murmurs spread around the chamber. Claire glanced toward Sebastian. He offered no explanation. No reassurance. Only leaned forward. Tell me something, Miss Dawson. Why did you not keep it? Claire blinked. Because it was not mine. Several members exchanged looks. One actually laughed. Not cruelly. More like someone hearing an answer they did not believe. You expect us to accept that? Another voice asked. Claire looked around the room. It is the truth. The chamber grew quiet again. The skepticism remained. Sebastian finally spoke. That answer is exactly why she is here. The room reacted immediately. Claire noticed it this time. Small changes, tightened expressions, brief glances exchanged between council members. They were not surprised by her answer. They were unhappy about what it meant. The silver-haired woman turned towards Sebastian. Yes, hundreds of them, yes, and none of them produced a result worth discussing. Sebastian's gaze remained steady, until now. Silence followed, heavy silence. Claire felt as though she had accidentally walked into the middle of an argument that had started long before she arrived. The silver-haired woman stood slowly. You are making assumptions based on a single decision. No, Sebastian replied. I am making observations based on every decision. Claire frowned. Every decision? What did that mean? Before she could ask, a large screen illuminated along one wall. Images appeared. Security footage. Claire recognized the diner immediately. Then another image appeared, the antique shop, then the sidewalk, then the phone records showing the rejected offer. Claire stared in disbelief. They had been watching everything, every choice, every opportunity, every temptation. The realization hit harder than she expected. She looked toward Sebastian. You monitored all of it? Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. Sebastian did not look away. Yes. Claire felt disappointment settle heavily inside her chest. Not because he watched, because he never told her. The chamber seemed to notice the shift immediately. The silver-haired woman almost looked satisfied. Now she understands. Claire lowered her eyes toward the polished table. For the first time since meeting Sebastian, she questioned whether any of their conversations had been genuine, whether the quiet talks in the diner had meant anything beyond observation. Unfortunately for her, the next revelation was already waiting, because at that exact moment, a legal advisor entered the chamber carrying a sealed historical document, and according to the expression on his face, whatever he had discovered was about to change the entire discussion. The legal advisor crossed the chamber carrying a weathered leather case that looked older than anyone present. Every conversation stopped. Even the council members who had been openly skeptical turned their attention toward him. Claire remained seated near the end of the polished table, still struggling with the realization that nearly every step of the past week had been observed. The advisor carefully opened the case and removed several documents protected beneath transparent sleeves. Yellowed paper, official seals, signatures faded by time. He placed them before the council. The records have been verified, he announced. Multiple archives confirm their authenticity. The silver-haired council member folded her arms. Then tell us what you found. The advisor adjusted his glasses. The medallion was not merely a family possession. He paused. It was designated centuries ago as a stewardship artifact. Confused expressions appeared throughout the room. Claire listened carefully. The advisor continued. Under the original charter of House Romano, any individual who discovered and safeguarded the medallion without seeking personal gain could temporarily become its lawful steward until ownership was formally reclaimed. The room fell silent. Several council members exchanged uneasy looks. The silver-haired woman frowned. That law has not been invoked in generations. No, the advisor agreed, because nobody ever qualified. Another council member leaned forward. Explain. The advisor opened a second file. We reviewed every documented test involving the artifact over the last 200 years. Some sold it immediately, some concealed it, some demanded rewards, others attempted negotiations. He looked directly toward Claire. Miss Dawson is the first individual on record who repeatedly chose to return it despite increasing opportunities to profit from it. The chamber grew quieter with every word. Claire sat perfectly still. The information felt unreal. She had never wanted recognition. She had simply wanted to do what seemed right. The advisor continued presenting evidence, phone records showing rejected offers, reports from investigators, statements from witnesses. Even small moments Claire barely remembered appeared inside the files. A cashier who accidentally gave her too much change years ago, a misplaced wallet returned to its owner, an elderly neighbor she had quietly helped for months without telling anyone. One example followed another. Not dramatic acts, not heroic acts, just ordinary choices repeated over many years. Claire felt increasingly uncomfortable as the list continued. She was not proud of those things because she never considered them special. To her, they were normal. The silver-haired council member finally looked toward Sebastian. You investigated her entire life. Sebastian remained calm. Only after the first test ended, Claire looked toward him. For the first time since arriving at the court, she noticed something different in his expression. There was no triumph there, no satisfaction. If anything, he appeared almost relieved. The realization surprised her. The advisor closed the final file. Based on every available record, Miss Dawson's behavior has remained remarkably consistent. Another council member sighed heavily, which means she did not pass because she was being watched. Correct, the advisor said. She passed because she would have made the same choices regardless. The statement settled over the room. Slowly, the skepticism began to weaken, not disappear, but weaken. Claire noticed it immediately. The questioning glances became thoughtful, the dismissive expressions became uncertain. Some council members even seemed impressed despite themselves. Then the advisor revealed one final document, the oldest of them all. The seal at the bottom carried the same crest engraved upon the medallion. There is one additional clause, he said. If a qualified turned toward him, if ownership rights may legally identified, unless the steward voluntarily declines them. Claire blinked. The words took several seconds to fully register. Ownership rights, transfer, declines. The silver-haired woman looked genuinely alarmed. Several others reacted similarly. The advisor placed the document on the table. Under the original charter, Miss Dawson now has a legal claim to the medallion itself. Complete silence followed. Claire stared at the ancient document, then at Sebastian, then back at the medallion resting inside its wooden box. Millions of dollars, historical significance. A treasure coveted by collectors and protected by one of the oldest vampire houses in existence. And according to a centuries-old law, it might now belong to her. What Claire did not yet know was that the decision waiting ahead would become the single most important choice of her entire life. Claire barely heard the conversations that followed. The chamber seemed distant now, as though the world had moved several steps away from her. The ancient document remained on the table. The medallion rested inside its wooden box nearby, and according to a law written centuries before she was born, both could legally become hers. Outside, the towering sunlight reflected across the city skyline. Inside, silence lingered. Nobody appeared eager to speak first. Finally, the silver-haired council member broke the tension. Miss Dawson should be informed of the practical implications. Her tone remained controlled, but Claire noticed something had changed. The dismissal was gone. In its place stood reluctant respect. The legal advisor nodded. The artifact could be sold, transferred, displayed, or retained under her stewardship. Claire looked at him. You are serious? Completely. The advisor slid another document across the table. Numbers filled the page: insurance estimates, historical valuations, market projections. Claire glanced at the first figure and immediately looked away. It represented more money than she could imagine earning in several lifetimes. Her grandmother's medical concerns would disappear. Every bill would disappear. Every uncertainty would disappear. Yet the thought brought surprisingly little excitement. Instead, she felt something else. Responsibility. Sebastian remained silent throughout the discussion. He sat at the far end of the table, watching without interruption. Claire found herself looking toward him repeatedly. Part of her expected him to speak, to influence the decision, to explain what he wanted. But he did none of those things. At last she addressed him directly. What would you do? Several council members immediately looked uncomfortable. Sebastian held her gaze for a moment before answering. It does not matter what I would do. It matters to me. No, he said quietly. This choice belongs to you. The simplicity of the answer surprised her. There was no persuasion, no hidden pressure. For the first time since the test began, Sebastian seemed determined not to influence the outcome. The realization settled heavily in Claire's mind. Everything before this point had been observation. This moment was different. This moment was entirely hers. The council adjourned shortly afterward. Claire was escorted to a private observation lounge overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across one side of the room. The view seemed endless. Cars moved like tiny lights far below. Clouds drifted above distant skyscrapers. The wooden box rested on a small table beside her. Hours passed. Nobody interrupted. Nobody pressured her. As daylight slowly softened into evening, Claire thought about her grandmother. She thought about the diner, the regular customers who complained about coffee prices, the worn apartment she called home, the countless ordinary moments that had shaped her life. Then she thought about the medallion, every problem it could solve, every opportunity it represented. If she accepted ownership simply because she could, would that make the medallion hers, or would it only make the law convenient? The answer arrived quietly. Not dramatic, not sudden, just clear. When evening finally settled over the city, a soft knock sounded at the door. Sebastian entered alone. The fading sunlight painted silver reflections across the room. Neither spoke immediately. Claire looked out at the skyline one final time before turning toward him. Sebastian studied her expression. For the first time all day, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Not fear, not concern, simply uncertainty, because despite everything he had learned about Claire Dawson, this was the one choice he could not predict with complete confidence. And as she rested her hand gently on the wooden box, the future of the medallion was only seconds away from being decided. Evening settled over the city like a blanket of golden shadow. The last traces of sunlight reflected against the glass walls surrounding the observation lounge while Claire stood beside the small table. The wooden box rested beneath her hand. Sebastian remained near the doorway, waiting patiently. Neither rushed the moment. The silence between them felt different now. Not uncomfortable, not uncertain, just important. Claire finally opened the box and lifted the medallion from its velvet wrapping. The silver surface caught the fading light. For several seconds she simply looked at it. The object had changed her life in less than a week. It had brought her into a world she never knew existed. It had revealed truths about other people and about herself. Most importantly, it had offered her something she had never possessed before. Choice. Real choice. Sebastian watched quietly. His expression revealed nothing. Claire turned toward him. "Do you know what I kept thinking about today?" she asked. "No. Everyone keeps talking about what this medallion is worth." Sebastian remained silent. Claire smiled faintly. "Nobody talks about why it exists." That answer seemed to surprise him. She continued before he could respond. "The money is real, the history is real, but none of those things are the reason people protected it for centuries." Slowly, she placed the medallion back inside the box. Some things matter because they belong somewhere. The room became completely silent. Outside, city lights began appearing one by one across the skyline. Claire carefully closed the lid. Then she carried the box toward Sebastian. He did not reach for it immediately. "You understand what you are giving up," he said. It was not a warning, not persuasion, just fact. Claire nodded. "Yes, your claim is legal, I know. Nobody here can force this decision. I know that too." Sebastian looked down at the box. For the first time since she met him, he appeared genuinely unsure of what to say. Claire realized something in that moment. For centuries, he had probably watched people choose wealth, influence, advantage, opportunity. The medallion had shown him countless versions of human ambition. Perhaps that was why he seemed so still now, because this choice did not fit the pattern. Claire extended the box another inch. "It was never mine." Sebastian slowly accepted it. Neither spoke. The simple transfer felt far heavier than the object itself. Across the city, millions of people were finishing ordinary evenings without knowing that a fortune had just been refused inside one of the most powerful buildings in the vampire world. Eventually, Sebastian lifted his eyes. "Why?" The question came quietly. Not from a king, not from a ruler, just from a man who genuinely wanted to understand. Claire thought for a moment before answering. "Because if I kept it, I would spend the rest of my life wondering whether I earned it or inherited a technicality." The words hung in the air. Sebastian said nothing. Claire continued, "I do not want to build my future on a loophole." For several seconds he simply stared at her. Then something unexpected happened. The calm certainty that always surrounded him seemed to disappear. Not completely, just enough for her to see the person beneath the title. Beneath the reputation, beneath 600 years of distance, he looked genuinely moved. The realization caught Claire off guard. The room remained silent for so long that she almost wondered whether he had heard her. Finally, Sebastian looked down at the box again, then back at her, yet no answer came, no speech, no explanation, no carefully measured response, nothing. For perhaps the first time in centuries, Sebastian Romano appeared completely speechless, and as the lights of the city shimmered beyond the windows, Claire suddenly understood that the test had ended long ago. What mattered now was not the medallion, not the fortune, not the ancient law. It was the simple truth standing between them, because somewhere along the way, the man who had set out to measure another person's character had discovered something he never expected to find. 3 weeks later, the neon sign outside Dawson's diner buzzed softly against the evening sky. Cars moved along the highway. Rain clouds drifted across the horizon. To anyone passing by, it looked like an ordinary night. Inside, customers filled booths with conversations about work, family, sports, and weekend plans. The scent of fresh coffee floated through the air. Plates clinked. The jukebox played an old country song near the corner. Life had returned to normal. At least that was how it appeared. Claire moved between tables, carrying a coffee pot in one hand and a tray in the other. She still worked the evening shift. She still greeted customers with the same quiet smile. She still remembered who preferred cream and who preferred sugar. Yet something had changed, not around her, within her. The uncertainty she had carried for years seemed lighter now. She no longer felt the need to prove her worth through endless effort. She no longer measured herself against people with more money, more influence, or louder voices. The strange weeks surrounding the medallion had taught her something unexpected. Character did not become valuable when someone powerful noticed it. Character was valuable long before anyone noticed at all. Across the city, the ancient medallion had already been returned to its secure place within House Romano's archives. The legal matter was settled. The council had accepted her decision. Even the silver-haired council member had personally thanked her before she left. The mystery was over. The choice was made. The story should have ended there, yet some endings quietly become beginnings. Near closing time, Claire finished wiping down the same booth where everything had started. The same booth where she had discovered the wooden box beneath the seat. She paused for a moment and smiled at the memory. Then the bell above the entrance chimed. A cool breeze drifted into the diner. Claire looked up automatically. Her heart skipped once. Sebastian Romano stood in the doorway, not surrounded by advisors, not followed by security personnel. No luxury convoy waited outside. He wore a simple dark coat and carried himself with the same calm confidence she remembered. Yet somehow he looked different, more present. Several customers glanced toward him before returning to their meals. To them he was simply another man entering a diner. Claire found herself smiling before she realized it. Sebastian walked toward the booth near the window, the same booth where he had first ordered black coffee, the same booth where the test had quietly begun. This time he did not sit alone. He looked at Claire and nodded toward the seat across from him. "Do you have a few minutes?" Claire glanced around the nearly empty diner. Her shift was almost over. She slipped into the seat opposite him. Outside, streetlights flickered on one by one. Rain began tapping softly against the glass. For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable now, familiar. Finally, a waitress from the day shift approached, carrying 2 fresh cups of coffee. She placed them on the table and walked away. Claire laughed softly. "You did not even order." "I was optimistic," Sebastian replied. The answer made her smile again. Was simple. No discussions about ancient laws, no debates about priceless artifacts, no tests, no hidden agendas. They talked about ordinary things: her grandmother, the diner, books, travel, the city. For the first time, Sebastian seemed interested not in evaluating Claire, but simply knowing her. Hours passed unnoticed. Eventually, the diner lights dimmed for closing. Outside, rain shimmered beneath the streetlights. Claire looked through the window toward the dark highway beyond, then back toward the man sitting across from her. The distance between their worlds remained enormous. One was a waitress, the other had ruled an empire for centuries. Yet somehow that difference no longer felt important. Because trust had replaced suspicion, respect had replaced curiosity, choice had replaced obligation, and as 2 untouched coffee cups released gentle curls of steam beneath the warm diner lights, the image reflected the beginning of the story perfectly while transforming everything it once meant. The first time Sebastian Romano sat at this table, he came searching for proof that goodness could survive temptation. The last time he sat here, he already knew the answer, and this time he stayed not because of a test, a medallion, or an ancient tradition. He stayed because of Claire Dawson.